Hey, welcome back. So in this video, we're going to talk about events and event listeners. And event-based programming is really important in JavaScript. JavaScript, as we've talked about before, is really a single-threaded call stack. So there's a single thread that's running down a call stack, executing functions that are on that call stack. And then we have this event loop that, based upon what events have happened and what listeners that we've attached to those events, then that event loop will put another function on the call stack. First, we're just going to talk about what are events. And I think the best way that we can talk about events is just show some examples of them. Events in the browser are prolific. We have already seen some mouse events. So there's click, double click, mouse down, mouse up, mouse move, mouse over, mouse out. So all those mouse events. There's keyboard events that we can listen for, like key down and key up. There's events associated with forms, like submit, when an element has been changed, or when you lose focus, or when it gets focus. There's events associated with the window itself, the whole window. So sometimes you want to only run a certain script after you know everything in the window has been loaded. So there's like a load event here for that. So maybe you want some JavaScript to run when you resize the window, or when you scroll or unload. There's clipboard events, there's drag and drop events, there's media associated events. So when an event is raised or when it is triggered, we have something that's called event propagation. The event propagation really happens in two phases. There's a capturing phase where we're going down the DOM tree until we get the event where it was triggered at. And then there's a bubbling up phase where we bubble back up through the DOM tree, through all the elements until we get to the outermost element. Here's the capturing phase. Again, the event starts from the outermost element or the document element and travels down the DOM tree, trickling down through each intermediate ancestor until it reaches the actual target. When I click this add stock button, let's pull up the inspector. Here's the add stock button. So when I click that click event is going to actually start all the way out here, and it's going to traverse down the tree. So here's the first one, and then it goes into this one, and then now it's in this div because that's where the form is, and then it's in the form element, and then finally it gets to the button element, which is what triggered the event initially. And that's the capturing phase. And then it traverses back up the tree in the exact opposite order. So it goes up to the parent form, to the parent div, to the parent div, to the body, all the way to the HTML. And there's a nice article here about this JavaScript propagation. I would recommend that you visit this article if you really want some more detail about, the capturing phase and then the bubbling phase. And here's a great visual. So the capturing phase, it goes down until it reaches the element that started the event. And then from there, it traverses back up the tree in the bubbling phase. And when we subscribe or listen to events, we can listen to the event either on the capturing phase when it goes down, or we can listen to it on the bubbling phase when it's going back up. Most of the event listeners, if you don't specify, you're really dealing with the bubbling phase. And because of event propagation, you don't necessarily have to subscribe to the click event on the TD. I could rather put the listener up on the table. So then I have a single event listener on the table element that listens for the click events. And the click event, we can see where it originated from. The target was a TD. And using this kind of event delegation, we can minimize the number of events we're registering with our system, and that helps performance. In any listener, whether it's in the capturing phase or the bubbling phase, we can stop the propagation of that event. So if I call stop propagation on the event and it's in the capturing phase, then it won't propagate past that level. And that is a little bit different than another function called preventDefault. What preventDefault does is prevents the browser's default actions associated with that specific event. So for example, when you click a link, the default action of the browser is to navigate to whatever the new URL is going to be. Or when you click, for example, the submit button on a form, the default browser action is to submit that data back to the server. So by calling preventDefault, you can cancel out whatever that default action might be. Okay, so let's talk about how we can attach events to our DOM elements. One way is we can directly attach them in the HTML. This is not necessarily the recommended way. It has some deficiencies, but for now, let's go over to our HTML, and I'm going to search for onClick because that's the event that I attach things to. And so you can see there's a number of instances of onClick. And we're going to use this to demonstrate the propagation effect that we saw. So down here, there's a button that we are going to attach this onClick, and we're going to log the button. And for now, I'm going to take this code, event propagation, stop propagation. We're going to take that out. On the button's parent class, on the onClick event, I'm login TD. On the TD's parent class, the TR, I'm console login TR. On the TD's parent, tBody, I'm console login tBody. And I don't think I go past that. So you'll be able to see when all these on-click events happen. So I'm going to refresh this page. We're going to come over, we're going to click the remove button, and you can see button, this console log was run, this console log TD was run, this console log TR was run, and then this console log tBody was run. This is really happening on the bubble up propagation side. So it's on the bubble up phase, not the capturing phase. And we'll see more about that in a little bit. But let me go back here and we're going to add back in this event stopPropagation. And I'm going to repeat this same process. I'm going to click that remove button and you can see button now and the event has stopped. It's not bubbling up to console log TD, or it's not bubbling up to the TR, and it's not bubbling up to the tBody. So this is one way that we can add these events. We can add them directly to the HTML. Not necessarily the preferred way. One deficit, for example, in this is an on-click for the tBody, but maybe I want to have multiple listeners for that on-click. If I code it this way, I can only have a single listener. I only have one on-click attribute that I can assign a function to. Let's go back to our JavaScript and let's look at the JavaScript way to assign this. At a document level, this is the global document. I'm going to add an event listener. Whenever the click event happens, I want you to run this code, which is we're going to console log out two properties on the event target and current target. And let's see what we get here. So I'm going to refresh this page. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick something like this footer. Let me click on the word footer here. We're going to see our target, which is what I click. And then I'm also going to see the document root itself. That's the whole document because that is where this event handler is happening. So the current, it's been bubbled back up to the target and we're looking at it on the target side. And let's click around for a little bit. Let's see if I click on this input, the input is the target and you can see where the event handler is happening, the current target. Let's do not this remove. Let's click on this bottom remove here. And you can see, first of all, that I got the target, which is that button right there. And then it bubbled back up to the document level. But I also got this tBody. Where'd that come from? And if you remember, if I were to click, add a click event here, that bubbles back up to that tBody, which is right there. And that's the reason I'm getting that tBody console logged out. If I were to click the other one, I just get the button and only the button because that is run and then this event propagation has stopped. So let's go ahead and get that out of there again. Let's see what I get now. I refresh this. I'm going to click remove. And now you can see the propagation has happened. And then eventually, because the propagation has happened, I'm getting it all the way back to our document. I'm getting the listener that we attached at the document level. And let's do something interesting here. I'm going to run this code. Let's go what it does. So first of all, I'm selecting every single element that's in the DOM. And so for every element, I'm adding an event listener on the click event. On this listener, there's an extra option over here, which is true. And what that means is I'm going to attach this listener on the capturing phase of the event propagation. And so that's why we're logging capturing and then the tag name. So let's see what we get. And these are all alert boxes. So we'll have to dismiss them as we go. So I'm going to refresh this. And let's start with, for example, I click on my footer again. I'm going to get the alert box first. Nothing has been console logged out. So this event has not happened yet because it hasn't propagated up to the document level. But you can see we're at the capturing phase and we're at the highest level of the document. I'm going to click OK. Now we're capturing the body. So now we're here. This is where we're at. And remember, I've clicked on this footer div, which is not inside the table, not inside this div, but it's right here. So the next one is that div itself. So now we're on this div and we're in the capturing phase. Now we're going to switch back over to the bubbling phase. We're going back up. So now we're at the bubbling phase on the div. The next stop is the body on the bubbling phase. And then after that, we're back to the HTML on the bubbling phase. So I go back to my console. It's giving me some violations here because I'm waiting so long for this handler. But when I click the OK button, now the event handler that we registered will finally get run here. So I'm going to click OK. And you can see that it prints out target and the current target. So let's go ahead and refresh this and let's click something else. Let's click something deeper in here. Let's click this remove button and you'll see it propagate. From the HTML, it's going to go down, body, div, table, tBody, to the row, to the TD, to the actual button that we clicked. And then we're going to go back up the DOM to bubbling, to the button, to the TD, to the TR, to the tBody, table, div, body, HTML. And then finally, I get to that listener that I already subscribed to it. Let's look at some of the other events. Maybe I want to do a mouse position event. I got my footer. Right now it just says footer. I'm going to subscribe or listen to a mouse move event. And this event then will have properties on it. So it'll have a client X and a client Y. And then what we're going to do is set the inner text for this element to that mouse position. So I'm going to refresh this page. And now whenever I start to move the mouse, we're going to get positions down here. Now the coordinate system for this document is this upper corner is going to be 0, 0. So I get close as I can there. So I can kind of get all the way to the 0, 0 right there. And then X increases in this direction. So this is the most positive X value over there. And then Y increases going down the page. So this is the most positive Y value. So this corner is the largest X and the largest Y. And you can see that this event-based programming is pretty responsive. I mean, as I move this around, I mean, there's not a lot going on this page, but you can see these numbers are updating faster than I can read them. And I'm not getting a lot of mouse lag or anything. This is actually pretty good. Let's take a look at another example. Before we do that though, I want to disable this part and this part. So the click events, I'm just going to remove them, because as we start to interact with this, I don't want those click events to get in our way. But here's my input box. I can type whatever I want in here. We know that stock ticker symbols maybe have a certain form, and so I want to limit or constrain what the user can actually type. So let's copy in some new code. We're only going to allow lowercase letters and uppercase letters typed into the box. And so what that looks like is I have my input element right here, and I'm going to select it from the form input, and I'm going to add an event listener. So I'm subscribing to the key down event. And on the event, I can get the key that was pressed. Now there is a bit of code here. I got to allow some default actions for certain keys. So for example, when you hit enter, I would like you to still submit this form. When you hit the back button, I want you to delete or go backwards, or the arrow buttons or anything like that. So there are certain keys I don't want to interfere with. I'm going to allow them to do their default actions. But here's where I'm doing my own filtering. So if the key length, if I pressed a single key, 1, I'm using a regex here. I only want lowercase or uppercase letters allowed. If that's true, I'm going to return true, and we're all done. Otherwise, I'm going to prevent the default, which is the default action means I'm going to add that character to the input. So I'm going to prevent that. So if I refresh over here, if I type lowercase letters, those are all good. If I type uppercase letters, those are all good. But if I try to type a number, like a number 1, I'm pressing 1, you can see it 1, 1. It's not adding it to my input box. My backspace button still works. If my arrow keys, every time I press an arrow key, that works. The shift key still works. The tab key tabs to the next one. And so you can see all those other special characters are allowed, but I'm just not allowing anything that's not a letter. Now, like I talked about over here in the HTML, here's my input box. I could add an on-click event right here. And you can see all these on events. These are all events you can subscribe to, but here's the on-click event. I could do it that way. I could also add it over here. So one of the things I could do is I could write code like this. On key down, console log that event. Let's see what happens now. So I'm going to refresh. I'm going to type the letter A, and you can see I got my original listener, which was up here at the top where I'm doing the filtering, and I got the new listener also, which is down here. Now notice if I tried to do this, you probably already know what's going to happen here. There's one endpoint. I set it to this function. I immediately reset it here. So this is not going to allow me to subscribe to listeners. It's just going to do the first ones. It's just going to do whatever the last one is. So let's go and refresh it to see that. I type A and I get this on keyboard number 2. I'm going to get rid of that because we don't need that. But if I want to do multiple listeners, I can use my add event listener for that input, add another key down event, and here's my second listener, really my third. But if I refresh and I type A, now you can see the original where I'm doing the filtering, the on key down one, which I added with the on key down keyword, and here's my other event listener. So I can have multiple event listeners all on the same event to the same element. Let's take a look at another example here. I have this stock picker, this form. When I enter a symbol, I want to be able to click add stock and submit that form. But as good developers, before we submit forms, we want to validate the data on the client side and also on the server side. What does that look like? So I have my form, and I'm going to prevent the form submission. Here I'm selecting the form. I'm adding a listener to the submit event. I'm going to do some validation right here. And my simple validation, I'm going to set it as invalid. So it's false, not valid. If it's not valid, I'm going to console log that the form submission is prevented, and I'm going to prevent the default. So that means that the browser is not going to submit this form data back to my server. I will never reach this point down here because of that return statement here. So let's go ahead and refresh here. It doesn't matter what's in there. I'm going to click add stock. It says the form submission has been prevented. and you can see it didn't refresh this page. If I set this to true, say the form is valid. Let's see what we get now. So I'll refresh this. I'm going to click add stock, and you see how, watch up here, it refreshes the page. And the network request, if I preserve the log here, click add stock, you can see then that it reloads the page here. If I type in a symbol, whatever it is, add stock, here's another one with the add stock. And because I don't have a name attribute here, it's not really doing anything, but let's go ahead and add the name. I'll refresh this again. Let's clear it out. And let's see, Apple. I click add stock. It didn't stop it, but now you can see it's appending the stock dash symbol. And the reason that is because my method wasn't specified as anything, so it defaults to get. But let's do a post, which is usually what you do for a form. Although in this particular case, because you're really just getting data, maybe you would still use the get. But let's go ahead and refresh one more time. And let's do Google in this case. I click add stock. And here you can see it's a post event to the Google. And of course, no matter what I do, if that's false, if I refresh this page and I return false to that, let's clear this out. Meta, I click add stock. Nothing happens here. There's no network requests because the form submission was prevented. Okay, so let's look at another example. We have these remove buttons that when you click the remove, it's going to remove that row right there. So let's go ahead and try to make that function. We're going to do this in two different passes. First of all, this is going to be our first try right here. Okay, so I'm doing a query, and I'm getting all of the elements that have the dot remove row, which is just my TRs. So if I go down here and I refresh, let's clear out that, and then let's go look at the TR or the elements here. So these buttons have this remove dash row class, which I'm using for my selector. For every button, I got this loop. I'm adding an event listener on the click. What I'm going to do is just doing the login that I had up here before. So I'm going to redo that log. Then I'm going to go get the TR. So I'm going to use the closest key or the closest method to find the closest TR for this button. I'm just going to go back up, find the TR, log the TR, and then I'm going to set the TR style with a text decoration of a line through. So I'm going to save this. Let's refresh over here and let's click on a remove. So I click remove and you can see the line through all of that element. So it's like I removed it. Click here and a remove. Now that certainly functions. I want to show you a second way using event delegation to do this. And after we implement this way, talk about the pros and the cons. So I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of this because we don't need competing listeners. So that was the first try. Here's the second try. I'm selecting the T-body element. So not every single button, but I'm going up here, T-body. I know T-body is the first common parent of all those buttons. So we're going to add this event listener to the T-body. And you can see right here, we've selected T-body. We're adding the click event listener to it. Every single time I click anywhere in this T-body, whether it's on Apple or date or the remove, I'm going to get this event. But now what I want to do is just filter out to the events that happen for that button. And here's that filter. If the event target tag name is a button and the class list contains remove row, then I'm going to run that same code that we did up here. Let's refresh this page and see how this works. So I click remove, the event will get bubbled back up to the T-body, get handled there, and I get my strike throughs, and same thing there. Now let's take a look at our first try and our second try. Our first try, first of all, there is an event listener for every single button. So the more listeners I have, the more memory, the less performance, and all of those things that go with it. So my second try, I just have a single listener. That's a lot more efficient than adding a listener to all of those buttons. Now there's also a benefit that you may not think about right away is what if this is a dynamic application and at some point I add another row here. Well, what I'm going to have to do is when I add that row is I'm going to have to add a listener here. But what if I forget? Then that row's remove button won't work. By adding this listener at a higher level or delegating it up to a higher level, I don't have to add the listener on the button. I can just create that element and it will automatically perform like the rest of the buttons. So that's it for this lesson. In the next lesson, we're going to circle back to our form and start to talk about how we handle form submissions properly, proper validation, proper submission. So we'll see you then.